Hello and welcome to MaAmbassador Edu. I'm Pete Vowels, the British Ambassador to Zimbabwe.
And I'm FoLake, the Nubian Queen, the International African.
Now, I've been in Zimbabwe for about 8 months, and wherever I go, I've come across stories of incredible Zimbabweans doing fantastic things here in Zimbabwe, but also in the United Kingdom. So FoLake and I thought, why not bring some of the stories of those incredible Zimbabweans to you? They're experts in their fields, they might be in academia, they might be in the sciences, they might be in the arts. We thought it'd be a good idea to bring some of those stories so they could share their careers, their how they got to where they are, their plans, the tips for other people in thinking about their own careers. And I hope that you'll be as inspired as we are by these stories. So, who have we got today?
Ooh, I'm quite excited about today. We've been jumping up and down all day, looking forward to the woman that we have. She is obviously based in the UK. She is a businesswoman. She's a consultant. Many of you might recognize her as being the woman who's gone and invented, wait for it, the Sadza cooker. She's also gone and written a cookbook, which is a Zimbabwean British fusion of exciting recipes. And it's also the name of her company, Cooking with Kaz. But wait for it, Pete, what's the exciting news?
Well, the fantastic news is that Kaz is here in the studio with us today, and Kaz has brought with her her Sadza cooker. So, tell us about it. Where did it come from? How does it work?
Cool. Thanks for having me both. Super excited to be part of this podcast. And yes, I've brought the Sadza cooker. It's an innovation rather than an invention, because I guess the difference between an innovator and an inventor is innovators take pre-existing concepts. So slow cookers and multi-cookers existed already, but for it to become a Sadza cooker, that's where the innovation came in. So I prefer to be referred to as an innovator with regards to the Sadza cooker. With the Sadza cooker, I run a catering business in the UK called Cooking with Kaz, and I cook for a variety of occasions, whether it is a birthday party, it's a corporate gathering, it's a wedding. We offer those services, and I work with a small team to produce those. And our whole thing is taking traditional Zimbabwean recipes and giving them our own personal twist. And we try to be very experimental with these things. How the Sadza cooker came about, one of the popular recipes in our cookbook, Zimbabwean Food Reimagined, is Sadza bites. We cook Sadza in different variations, Sadza with seasoning, Sadza cooked with fish to make fish cakes. And I found, as part of the business, the operations of getting the different pots of Sadza cooking alongside each other while trying to manage the kitchen were an absolute nightmare. So we were on a search to find something that would simplify our processes. It's all about being efficient. It's all about being consistent as well with what you're providing. And that's where the journey with the Sadza cooker began. Okay, so I don't want to bore you with the details on how the Sadza cooker became technical, but I'm keen to answer any questions you may have about the cooker as well.
Great, it's incredible. And so, for someone like me, who's probably I think is known as being able to cook bachelor Sadza, this sounds like the perfect piece of equipment. Where can I buy them?
So the Sadza cookers are currently available on our website, sadzakooker.com, and we are selling them internationally. So we've had orders in the UK, in Canada, in Australia, New Zealand, anywhere where there's Zimbabwean presence. This cooker has found itself in the homes in all those countries. So you can buy it on sadzakooker.com, and we'll have it delivered straight to you.
I'm quite fascinated how you managed to get technology into the process of making Sadza, right? And anybody who's made Sadza, including Pete, knows the key to get the perfect Sadza is how you, in Shona would say, kumona, mixing in the flour into the water and get the right consistency. How did you figure out how to get that science right using the Sadza cooker?
So it's all about the recipe, to be honest. It's the combination of water, the combination of vuvu, and time and the heat that it takes. But there's also a stainless steel blending arm that modulates at different intervals cooking the Sadza. So Sadza that's cooked properly takes time. Anyone that tells you they can make Sadza in 10 minutes is probably not cooked properly. So you want to at least give it 45 minutes so that the corn really sort of it softens, and then it cooks really well when you start doing the monitoring action, like you said.
Wow. So you've also, Kaz, brought us this beautiful copy of your cookbook, Cooking with Kaz. Can you, I mean, absolutely stunning and stunning photography, stunning images within it. Can you tell us a bit about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was a passion project during the pandemic, and like I said, I've got a catering business. We've been experimenting with recipes for years now, and a lot of people always asked, how can I make the food you make? And the idea sort of came to create a cookbook. And I sort of gave myself a challenge to have completed it by the end of 2020. And I found myself struggling at the beginning of 2020. And then the pandemic came, and lo and behold, I had so much more time to be able to actually execute this vision that I'd always had. And the idea is to document the style of cooking that I do, which is taking traditional recipes and giving them my own twist, but also opening people's minds to how the various cultures that I've experienced, for example, living in the UK, can also provide a bit more flavour and participate with the flavours of what we eat in Zimbabwe.
It's amazing. I come from Scotland, or I live in Scotland. Well, my home's in Scotland, and I thought the Boerewors Scotch egg was particularly struck me as a good example. So what you talk about in the book is cuisine, or Zimbabwean cuisine, traditional cuisine with a twist. And so the example of sadza fish cakes, sound really different. And what I really love about it is how you've connected a soundtrack to it. So you've recommended a song for each recipe.
Yes.
So I noticed you've got Amara Brown, you've got Olumutukuzi songs, you've got Mapfumo with Dad's Roadrunner. Sound like a real highlight. Tami Moyo, Sadza and Lacto Eaten Mess. So it sounds like a good, nice, interesting fusion between a sort of classic British meal, eaten mess, but you've added it with Sadza and made it into a Zimbabwean British meal.
Absolutely. So music and bringing people together is something I'm really passionate about, and I like this idea where you've set the table, everyone's about to dig into their meal, and it's almost like a soundtrack that you have in the background before you take your first bite. And it becomes this multi-sensory experience where you're tasting the different flavors, the textures, but you've also got the sounds from the music, and it's a whole experience. You're not just gonna dive in and just eat it. You spend hours making this food, so you want to almost kind of create an environment and a platform for you to really sort of get into the meal and the culture.
Wow.
I'm really enjoying this conversation. This is the second story, Pete, we've had about how COVID came in and light bulb moments came in, and we're so grateful to having you here, Kaz. And I'm also thinking one thing that I'm loving just listening to what you're going on about today is the ability for us to be able to tell our own stories. And this is one way of telling our own stories in terms of food. So, Kaz, talk to us from being an innovator of the Sadza Cook to having an exciting day job in the UK. Firstly, where do you find the time to do all this? What did you study, and are you doing what you'd always wanted to do?
It's a loaded question, but it's an interesting one. I'm definitely doing what I want to do, and I think that's probably key to living a self-actualized life. You pick what you want to do, and you work towards delivering those goals. So I started cooking at the age of about 9, 10. I've always been passionate about food. I come from a family of foodies. My dad's a great cook as well. And basically what happened as we were growing up, my parents just allowed me to experiment. And as a result, I ended up, it almost kind of became my brand within family occasions. And I was entered into a cooking competition at the age of 14, completely by accident. And I wasn't meant to win. I was just meant to show up and get on with what I needed to do. But I kept winning. And it became quite apparent that, this is something that's inbuilt within me. So then I remember when I got to the last round, I didn't actually win that final one. It was in a restaurant in Poole. And they basically said that, you had failed on the presentation. And for a lot of African cuisine, the focus is always about flavor and community, but not a lot of attention is paid to how the food is presented. So that became part of how I told my Zimbabwean food story by beautifully decorating food, really taking time to garnish and understand how you can make it look appealing as well as taste good. I remember telling my parents I want to quit everything. Don't want to go to school anymore. I want to become a chef. And my parents said, absolutely no. You're going to become a doctor.
Sounds very Zimbabwean.
Yeah. So we continued the journey, tried to force the whole biology and chemistry thing with me, and it just didn't work. I just wasn't that gifted in those subjects. And I remember sort of having a conversation with my parents saying, look, I find economics interesting. I find, the ideas of communities and geography is interesting. I want to go to university and study economics and geography. My dad promised me, he said, look, if you're still passionate about this whole cooking thing after you've done your degree, we will support you all the way through. I'm like, cool, let me go to school and finish doing what I needed to do. So I go and study economics, and economics is a study of it. It's basically the study of life. It's a type of philosophy. But one area that took an interest for me was energy. I became obsessed with the subject. I did internships. I studied it. I went to conferences in my free time. It just became a really fascinating concept, because when you really think about it, no economy can really stand without, really investing in energy and thinking about the solutions for that, even as we become more technologically advanced. So finishing university, didn't get my perfect graduate job as I wanted. So I found myself back in the kitchen cooking, and just throwing myself at the recipes, but also thinking more deeply about how I wanted to build my career. And a few months on, I managed to then build what became Cooking with Kaz, the brand, and a career in the power and utility sector. So my experience ranges from energy as well as water. My focus has mostly been around the tech aspect of those things, but with experience in the operational side of things, as well as working in industries that are specifically around renewal. So that's, in a long-winded way, that's been my journey. I am doing what I enjoy doing, which is, I'm passionate about a career in energy, but also passionate about all things Zimbabwean food.
It's amazing. You started the conversation talking about your the Saije cooker and Cooking with Kaz, the cookbook, and then suddenly threw in an entire different career in the energy sector, which just shows just the breadth of experience and what you do. And I understand that you were the former chair of the UK Young Energy Professional Forum. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah. So the Young Energy Professionals Forum is led by an organisation called Energy UK, and they are at the heart of the energy sector. Any discourse, any sort of lobbying with government is associated with that group. And what I loved about what Energy UK did was getting young people involved in the conversations around energy. One of the things that sort of became a powerful tool for me within my career was networking with like-minded people. So through the Young Energy Professionals Forum, I initially went in as a member, wanting to know more about the industry, wanting to know more about the contribution I can make to the sector. And then I found myself sort of being thrusted into leadership, and I ended up starting off as the vice chair and then ended up chairing the forum. Under my leadership, for me, getting the voices of young people out there pertaining these matters is really important. So I led on our first thought leadership paper, which we ended up sort of presenting to some CEOs within the industry, as well as some government officials, just to inform them about the views of young people within the energy sector. So for context, the forum is made up of about 3,000 members. I led a committee of about 12 people, but we also had ambassadors that were representative of that group. And the idea, again, is to continue to engage different stakeholders at different stages in their career on what's happening within the energy sector. I'm massive on succession planning, and I think there's no better way to get people ready for the next phase of leadership by training the thinking and the mindset that's gone into what's created the decisions we have about energy at the moment.
So you mentioned a paper that you wrote and published that was representing the views of young people towards energy and strategic developments.
That's correct.
For energy in the UK. Naturally, I'm curious about what you think the young people's voice should be in Africa, particularly as far as energy is concerned. What sort of thoughts should we be penning down? Where should we be going as Africa, do you reckon?
You know what's really interesting? I think there are a lot of parallels to be learned between the UK and Zimbabwe pertaining to energy. So in the UK, there's this mindset that it's all you can eat energy. You turn on a light, you expect it to come on, and you just expect it to be that way. But when you think about the conversations we're having from an environmental perspective, it's just not sustainable. And the more technologically advanced we become, it's not sustainable. So again, you're seeing a lot of investment in UK infrastructure to understand how we can leverage demand and help to change people's attitudes around electricity as a result of that. In Zimbabwe, you know, a lot of houses you're seeing, they're becoming self-sufficient, investing in solars, investing in generators to be able to kind of forego some of the challenges that come with electricity. And I think the conversation that young people should be having around energy is particularly around energy security. Most progressive economies have technology at the heart of them, and you can't get anywhere without electricity from a technological perspective. So I'm a firm believer that, you know, there's more conversation to be had about energy security. There's more conversation to be had about even the affordability of things like solar panels. And lastly, more conversations around the environmental aspect of things. The world that we're living in now, we are stewards of the future generations that are to come. So if we're only focusing on what works for us in terms of our energy consumption, we are literally creating a nightmare for ourselves in retirement. So I think it's a consideration that needs to be taken in advance as well.
It's fantastic, and I think Kaz, it's another great example of the sort of power of I think this podcast of meeting people who are bridging, crossing the sort of UK Zimbabwe, seeing the connections, seeing the lessons that can be learned from both countries in a way, and I think it's a really fantastic. Hopefully, I feel like that's what we were trying to do. So it's fantastic to have you here, and I think I certainly just that energy. You do think about. I do have from a UK. I'll just echo your points about from having lived in the UK, where it becomes, you feel like it's a right to turn on the switch, and actually you think differently when thinking about power, I guess. And we think we've solarized our embassy and our residences, but you also think much different about power. So it's a good point. Thank you. So. When you've been doing this, you're an advocate. You're an advocate for good food, but you're also an advocate for.
She's got a lot of energy.
For energy, and you've been as part of the youth forum, but otherwise you've been engaging with senior stakeholders. You've been engaging with British ministers, which is fantastic. Again, for some of those experiences. Can you tell us about how that's been in terms of trying to shape policy at the kind of the top level?
Yeah. So like I said, the work I was doing with Energy UK created a fantastic platform. So one of the things, like I mentioned, the thought leadership paper, it wasn't something that existed before, but it's now become a staple because, again, to be able to kind of communicate on a strategic level, you want to have a multifaceted view on the things that are impacting different stakeholders. So what I found through the thought leadership paper, we're able to present the paper to government and this is during the Energy UK conferences, sitting on platforms, communicating the ideas of young people within the energy space. I found that through COP26, for an example, was quite involved with some of the events with Ofgem for that. There were many opportunities, again, to see the role of youth empowerment in strategic conversations. And also, I think at the heart of our generation, we've grown up with technology, we've grown up with the importance of, I guess, things like social media and how we communicate with each other. So more than ever, the idea of energy and electricity is quite relevant because of who we are as a result. So the experience with communicating with different senior stakeholders within the sector, including ministers, was honestly eye-opening, and the receptiveness to hear the voices of young people within the sector also enabled us to be, I guess, a bit more courageous and also want to take ownership. I think there's also a component of reverse mentoring that was also taking place where, as young people, we can share ideas and concepts that they can then apply to their policies now.
Thanks, because you've got so many sort of life tips in here about kind of, reverse mentoring or just a sort of general kind of adapting your career, taking really great lessons for people listening, I'm sure. What's next?
What's next? I am a firm believer in just understanding your passion as a person. Being introspective is core to my personal belief, and I'm also a person of faith. So all those things combined help me to sort of not look at life for what it is right now, but what could life be. And I'm on a journey to explore entrepreneurship probably at a much deeper level, not just through cooking, but through my experience within energy. So prior to, I guess, this conversation, I was working for a consultancy, and I've sort of pulled myself away from that consultancy to do my own work independently, learning how to build those relationships with stakeholders, because I believe, entrepreneurship works more for my personality type. I get quite restless. Once I've solved a problem, I want to know what the next one is. And I feel like entrepreneurship just comes with a lot of challenges by itself. And there's always something to keep yourself excited. And there's a component of managing your own destiny to an extent as well, perfecting a craft and developing yourself in that area. So all those things combined really do sort of play a part. With the Saije cooker, we're looking to bring a cookbook to accompany some traditional recipes that you can make with the product. So as much as it's called a Saije cooker, it's an 8-in-1 multi-cooker. You can use it to cook a variety of things. So just to show you the value of the product, we're looking to create a book that's going to accompany it. And, if you've got a multi-cooker at home, you'll probably be able to make some of the recipes there as well. So it's multifaceted. You're not sort of married to buying the Saije cooker to use that book as well.
Fantastic.
I'm just thinking as you're talking, Kaz, about the issue of energy and climate justice. For me, comes up as you talk about energy. We're having a problem with Zim. You might have heard this, that because of El Nino, we're going to have problems in terms of food in our country. I'm wondering, how do you contextualize the conversations around energy for people in Zimbabwe? I'm thinking somebody in the rural areas that may not completely comprehend what is going on around them in terms of climate change, in terms of, sustainable energy. I'm wondering what lessons you've picked up when you've been in the UK pushing these conversations for young people, writing publications. How do we make that conversation contextual for someone in Zimbabwe, in the rural areas, do you think?
It's an interesting question, and I'm a firm believer that we are all contributors to the community, the economy, and everything we have at the moment. I find it quite interesting, actually. So as I've been selling the Saije cooker, I've been quite shocked at the footprint of Zimbabweans globally. I've come across Zimbabweans in Switzerland, in New Zealand, in Australia, in Canada, all over. And for me, if you were to sort of turn that into a geographic map, it kind of shows you the size and the scope of how big Zimbabwe can be and the resources we have access to. And I think the first conversation to be had is how can we work in a united way to leverage the energy that we do have, but also the access that we have. Not many countries can probably say that for themselves, to say that they've got representation across all those different economies and they can take those lessons learned and apply them internally. At the heart of energy, one of the biggest challenges that I've seen within the UK is energy storage. There hasn't been any real economic ways to store electricity, and it's only through the investment in things like lithium, where we're looking at energy storage and batteries, where you're seeing that actually there is scope for that to happen. So I think it's an exciting time for Zimbabwe because, one, we've got the sun. Solar investment, I think, is a no-brainer. I recently came across a project in Vic Falls where they're looking to utilize hydro energy to use the storage aspect of it through heat, through the pump technology you can use with the waterfalls, but also generating electricity through hydro. I thought that was quite an interesting project that's underway in collaboration with Zambia. And I think from a rural perspective, it's bringing them along the journey. I'm seeing a lot of rural tourism within Zim, where people want to actually invest in places like Murewa and all the different kumushas. And I think there's an opportunity there again for not just young people, but also from an energy perspective to try and leverage those things as well.
This is incredibly fascinating for me.
It is, Kaz. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your story, your cooking story, your energy story, your kind of global activist story. So thank you, and it's been really inspiring to hear. So thank you so much. Thank you. I think that's the end of this one, but hopefully, sadly, but look forward to the next MaAmbassador Edu. Thank you very much.
This is Capital 100.4 FM, Harare's Heartbeat. We'll join you next month for another exciting episode of MaAmbassador Edu, so you can get to meet what else is cooking with Zimbabweans who are doing the most in the UK and also home.